Let's be honest. Quarterback Matt Zollers is a must-have prospect for Penn State in this class of 2025. Now, will they actually get his commitment? If Penn State does, they're going to have to fend off the likes of Georgia and Missouri to do it.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Four-star quarterback, Pennsylvania prospect Matt Zollers is set to commit very soon. He's down to 4 schools. Penn State is one of them. And can the Nittany Lions afford to lose his commitment? This is Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko. I'm your host of the show, and this is a Cruton episode. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. And because this is a Cruton episode, the everydayers know this. Help me welcome back Brian Smith, recruiting expert for the Locked On Podcast Network, also the host of Locked On Seminoles. And Brian, Matt Zollers is arguably one of the best quarterback prospects to come out of the state of Pennsylvania in the past 5 years. Maybe I'd even extend it to a decade. And this is somebody that has Penn State in his top 4, but Missouri and Georgia, right? He's racked up a lot of SEC offers. Pitt is also in there. His brother attends Pitt as a walk-on player, so they're that 4th school. But Penn State, since he is in your backyard, since this is a hometown kid, Penn State needs to make this a priority, especially since he's as highly rated as a quarterback. So I'm going to argue that this is difficult. This is really difficult if you do not land this player. I know the other schools that are involved in this recruitment between Georgia and Missouri, and yes, Pitt because of the family ties. But this is a must-have for Penn State. Yes, will the world still go around if Matt Zollers commits elsewhere? Yes, it will. But I can't help but between the optics and the pedigree that Zollers has with him, this is a must-have in the class of 2025.
This is the kid they've been recruiting forever, man. This is the one that's right down the road from your campus. So yeah, Zollers is really important from that. And I think it's kind of cool that if you can make it happen for any particular school, Penn State included, you get the local quarterback. If he could be the future of your program, that's kind of cool. Whether they want it to be or not, every head coach has to have a quarterback that's got some charisma and it's got some personality. It adds a little bit if he's the local guy. So Missouri, Georgia, Penn State, and a bunch of other schools went after him. Looks like it's going to be one of those 3. It's pretty interesting recruitment.
Yeah, and Zollers is just the kind of quarterback that I feel, yes, he's a very raw talent, but he's going to be 6'4" when all said and done. He could easily pack on 25 to 30 more pounds like Drew Aller. Drew Aller bumps up all the way to 242 pounds just like that. So to think that Zollers, who's already 6'4", could project somewhere at 225, 230. And then the way that he moves, Brian, that's what's the most impressive because, okay, Drew Aller isn't a statue. Like, he's got very good pocket mobility and he can tuck it and run when he needs to. But Zollers, you combine the arm strength and with this ability to create on the fly, he can ad-lib. And even though he's not listed as a dual threat quarterback, Brian, he is a dual threat quarterback.
I think that his film kind of speaks for itself. There's a mobile quarterback and then there's a dual threat. A dual threat to me is somebody who can take a handoff and score, and it can be a power run, it could be RPO, whatever. He can score. He's got enough speed. He's not super shifty, but he'll make the first guy miss.
Yes.
It's not going to make 4 guys miss like, a 185-pound running back, but he's got enough of it. He can run RPO all day. He could be at Auburn's offense. He could be Ohio State's offense back in the Tressel days, whatever, and he'd been fine. I think Urban Meyer could have used him, and Urban was as RPO heavy as you're going to see. Yeah. I believe this is a guy that would fit in and kind of change Penn State's dilemma a little bit because obviously passing game's been stagnant, and part of that is it's just too basic. Well, here's another way to change it up. Teams that use RPO, but that quarterback's got to be willing to take off and take some hits and make big plays. Zollers fits that profile very well.
So we've established location just being in-state, that sentimental aspect of it. Then the talent, pure talent alone. Now there's just scarcity. There are very few, if any, outside of Malik Washington, quarterback prospects that Penn State can turn to for a second QB in the class of 2025. So if they miss on Matt Zollers, is Penn State prepared to go all in on Malik Washington? Because how's Washington going to feel about that? He's got a top 6 of his own, and who knows where Penn State factors into that, right? They might be 6th, they might be 1st. He's visited a lot, but he hasn't taken an official visit. I think he's had almost a dozen unofficial visits. But then how do you think Washington feels about that? If Penn State's focus, like let's take a Ryan Montgomery, for example, probably wasn't getting enough attention from the Nittany Lions, decides to focus elsewhere. That's great. But now you're down to Zollers in Washington. There's really not another contender. It's no disrespect to Beckham Kritza. You've seen him play. He's down in the Florida area. He's a raw talent. But in this age of the transfer portal, NIL, Drew Aller's going to move on very soon, right? Bo Prabula is getting towards the end of his college career, if you can believe that already. You know, he's over halfway the midpoint of his process. You need 2 quarterbacks in this class to start to begin to think about that future transition.
If they don't get a second quarterback, I wonder if they would at least consider taking a kid in the portal that has multiple years left as a quarterback.
Yeah.
Just for full disclosure, and those that don't follow it, I sometimes forget this, but April 16th through the 30th will be a transfer portal window for football players. It is going to be maddening. I'm going to go ahead and say it. There will be players that even Zach has no idea are going to leave Penn State. They're going to leave and vice versa. Guarantee it.
Yeah.
It's going to happen after the spring game. I don't like where I'm at on the depth chart. That's 99% of the reason kids leave.
Yes.
And kids usually don't make very good decisions on that, but that's a whole nother podcast. This is your chance, though, maybe to get a quarterback. May not be a first-year starter in like 25, like after this season. I assume Drew will do well enough. Maybe he can turn pro, whatever. But if they do have that year, then you could fall off a cliff if they don't have something ready right away. That's, you want as many guns or many bullets in the gun as possible and let them figure it out a spring from now, and then you're going to lose kids. Everybody loses quarterbacks every year. A buddy of mine did a thing on a school that 2/3 of the kids, I think, it was Notre Dame, since the mid-'80s have transferred at quarterback. This isn't just recent. 2/3. Quarterbacks, you play one. 2/3 are transferred. That's pretty much standard. So you're going to lose kids, and then you know what? Somebody's going to lose the job next spring too. So you always got to be looking at the portal both directions.
I think that's definitely an interesting point. Talking about, Penn State needs them because of the transfer portal. They can also use the transfer portal to their benefit
100%.
if that's where it comes down to. So Brian, let's finish with this in the first segment, and then we're going to talk about some pass catchers that Matt Zollers could possibly be paired with. But that is the question. Does he commit to Penn State? Will he commit to Penn State? I've looked at it from who I've talked to around Penn State, just listening to other recruiting experts like yourself. It seems like Pitt's not a factor. Georgia's looking elsewhere for another quarterback prospect. So this is down to Missouri, surprisingly enough. I would think it would be Georgia, Missouri, and then the hometown school, Penn State. I like Penn State just from the fact that it is close to home, and they were one of the first big schools to offer him. Missouri, Georgia, Alabama, the SEC schools became late players in his recruitment. So I think that's what ultimately pays off for Zollers to become a Nittany Lion.
I've heard totally different, but that's why recruiting is fun. It's very, very wacky. Missouri may or may not be a factor, but my buddy covers Georgia very closely, and he thinks Georgia's the leader. Like his contacts are as good as it gets. Use your imagination. And if that's the case, so be it. I mean, I understand it's Georgia. I'm not a Georgia fan by any stretch, but I understand. So they signed a pretty good quarterback this past year, but a different kind of guy, more of a pocket kid. Zollers would be a different dimension for the Dogs. That would be interesting. The other kid, everybody's saying, well, what about Julian Lewis? I've heard that Georgia is not real thrilled with his timeline. Like he wants to drag it out a while, and Kirby wants his quarterback now. So I don't know how much of this is going to play out. And the kid, even if he knew right now he was going to Georgia, he could change his mind before the announcement, because that happens all the time. Take it for what it's worth.
Zollers has definitely done his due diligence. He's taken visits all the way up to this point, and he's ready to get his recruitment over. Again, at the time when you're watching or listening to this episode, it is within a 24-hour window. So we are officially on commitment watch for the 4-star quarterback, one of the top 5 in the nation. Yes, top 5 in the nation, the best out of Pennsylvania. Matt Zollers is set to commit April 4th, Thursday, at noon Eastern time. We'll see if he picks Penn State. Like you said, Georgia is more of a serious player than I've considered them. And then there's Missouri as well with what they need at the QB spot. Well, regardless if Zollers commits or not, Penn State is in a really good position at wide receiver, if you can believe that or not. And there is a lot of evidence to back that up, despite only having one commit in the class of 2025. Brian and I will discuss that on the other side of this break. Today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports. From live games to highlights to in-depth analysis, Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into an existing TV, and it will provide access to millions of movies and TV episodes as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball now that MLB is in the swing of things, or the college basketball tournaments, you're going to want to have Fire TV. Fire TV recently created the Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us here at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV lets you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, March Madness, NBA, MLB, as I've mentioned, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, and cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. That is Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. And since this is a recruiting episode, let's talk about the leaders in job recruiting, LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all of that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing a lot of hats and might not have the time or the resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even quicker. 2.5 million, that is right, 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn Jobs. So become one of them. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day long? Do you ever have to turn down the volume because of all of that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you each and every day to bring you the biggest stories without all of the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube. And now it is available on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let us know in the comments what you think about Matt Zollers and his commitment again within that 24-hour window. So it is, get your responses in quick. And if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. And check out Brian's work with the Locked On Podcast Network in recruiting at X. You can also follow his show, Locked On Seminoles. Wide receiver for Penn State has definitely been, just at least a lot more of a doom and gloom just because of the way the wide receivers performed. And commits have made that very apparent. Brian, you have said that Penn State has to show what it can do in the passing game, what it can do for the wide receivers before some of these wide receiver commits just, we'll go off of Penn State's word. No, there have been commits that have selectively said, I want to see how they do with Andy Kotelnicki, and then they'll factor a little more into my decision. But aside from a couple select prospects, right, that have admitted that publicly, for Penn State, they already have one highly rated 4-star and with a lot more potential in Lyric Samuel in the class of 2025. When you look at who else is visiting, who else they've offered, Penn State's in a very good position. And they're already rumored to pick up another 2 or 3 commitments from wide receivers that are in Pennsylvania or that are in the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia area. But I look at this group of visits that they have set up for the prospects, that are out of Florida, that are out of Texas. They have a lot of prospects that are coming all the way from Texas. And just to name a few. So guys like Kelshawn Johnson, that's in it. And these are all highly rated recruits. These are higher end 4-star. Andrew Marsh is another one. Brandon Finney is a local DMV Maryland player. There's Philip Bell out of the California area. So I'm mentioning it's Texas recruits, DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia. Taz Williams Jr. is another one out of the Texas area. These are all players that are confirmed to visit. And then there's Quincy Porter. Then there's Quincy Jones. So Penn State is in a really good spot here at wide receiver in the class of 2025. And Brian, it's just a breath of fresh air given what's been going on for the past, 2-3 seasons, ever since Jahan Dotson left.
I think the key here is getting these young men on campus to see it for the spring game. And I know what I'm about to say, college coaches loathe with every fiber of their being, but Penn State better do it. And they better throw it around in the spring game. I mean, they better throw it around, and I know they don't want to do it. If they don't, they're not getting these kids because they'll commit to other schools this summer. Now, they could flip them in the fall, but if they see anything remotely conservative, they ain't come. They haven't proven anything in it. Yeah. Receivers want to see the ball in the air. They don't care about the jersey color. They care about the ball in the air. That's just reality. Penn State, Florida State, USC, doesn't matter. So I'm going to be curious to see how many kids come out of there talking about the offense and not just the Penn State experience, which I've heard for years is a really neat campus and all that. I've never been there. But that'll sell itself. Receivers, though, specifically, got to see the ball in the air. That's why getting all these kids to come in the spring for a visit at some point, even if it was just a practice, is important. More FaceTime, more relationship building, and at least a chance to show your offense, because without that, they wouldn't get them back for an official visit. No shot. They're not going to waste their time on a school that struggled to throw the ball. So it is an impressive list. Like Samari Reed's a kid I know from South Florida. He's got a ton of offers, big body kid, looks the part, looks like a kid that goes to Florida State during the Bowden era. I mean, he's a dude. So if you can get those kind of kids on your campus, it'll take care of itself.
Right. And another one of those names at the wide receiver spot is Nashawn Montgomery. And that's another Florida area kid that so doesn't have the same build as Reed. But again, and we've talked about this ad nauseum for Penn State. In years past, decades before, this would never happen where you could get a prospect from Florida, a prospect from Texas. And now this is a legitimate possibility with what James Franklin, J1 Sider, and all of them, the rest of them, it extends past them because it's the entirety of the recruiting staff. And Marcus Higgins plays a huge role in this as the obviously as the wide receivers coach.
If you recruit collectively and the head coach has a plan that the assistants agree with, obviously Sider helps. I think he's the best recruiter in the country if I had to pick just one. Wow. But if you, he's really good. If you consistently do that, I mean, it's hard to screw up when you put Penn State across your polo. I mean, at some point you're going to fall into a few and you just keep pounding the pavement. Like Sider, for those that don't know, is from South Florida. He's a Broward guy, meaning Broward County, Fort Lauderdale, and that, Pompano Beach, the whole area through there. He has plenty of contacts. You just got to get them on campus. But again, the final piece is the ball in the air. They've done all their due diligence. Right. Now they've got to show these kids something. So they've impressed me because honestly, I didn't think they'd get this many kids to look at them. I would be, if I was a parent, I'd be very shocked. Like, why do I want to take what are you guys going to do? Why should we believe you? I've got all these SEC or ACC offers. Mm-hmm. It's probably come up quite a few times, I'm sure. So good for them. They've figured it out. That's impressive.
Well, when we've been honest about this, State College, Pennsylvania is a lot different than Daytona Beach, Florida, or Dallas, Texas.
That is the understatement of the millennium.
Yeah, exactly. Hot take there. Hot like the weather of Florida and Texas here. But this, like I said, a breath of fresh air is the way that this can be described as, because they're projected to get, close to home prospects like Alex Cyrus. That one's apparently a very good relationship, and a commitment is almost pending at this point. Never say never, but Penn State's in good standing with a prospect like Lex Cyrus. And then there's Jeff Exenor. So Penn State, yes, they got 3 in 2024, but 2025, 2026 to think ahead, Penn State could legitimately think about getting 4 or 5 in a cycle like an Ohio State does. Now, the last thing I want to finish on is Penn State felt like they were in a good standing with New Jersey prospect Desi Jones. And Jones, depending on where you look, some places have him a little higher, rated a little lower. A 3-star prospect seems to be the consensus, and that's the recruiting rankings always seem to be a little behind the 8 ball here, Brian. But Ohio State takes that commitment. Desi Jones, a 3-star prospect out of New Jersey, and the Buckeyes take his commitment now. obviously there's something here there's more than meets the eye in the case of Jones.
Two things. Number one, I didn't know much about him, and I saw his commitment roll across my X feed, and I'm like, okay. I think, if I remember right, he's DePaul Catholic in Jersey, but he's one of the parochial programs. Okay, so it's DePaul. That's a program Ohio State knows about. They do their own evaluations. But as far as the rankings go, most of the kids that you say, I'm not sure about this, where are they from? If they're not down south, most of the guys that in my business, they're down south. There are some exceptions. But we see all of them at these camps in the South. If you're from up north, you ain't been to one of these camps yet, your ranking's probably not done yet. There's no way to be everywhere. So that's part of it. But I will go with Ohio State's offensive staff on wide receiver offers above all.
Yeah. Kind of the same thing. Penn State, they took Xavier Thomas in the class of 2025. Didn't even have a recruiting profile. So again, it depends. That's very important. Are you going to see, are scouts seeing you, right? Because they can't go to every single high school game every single Friday night as much as there are many as there are recruiting experts, analysts, and scouts that go to these games. It's still not enough at the end of the day because the number of high school football players triumphs how many people can actually watch them and rate them and put together a database of this. But yes, I'm going to trust when Penn State takes a commitment. That's a little surprising. And the same thing with Ohio State here. But I thought Penn State had a legitimate chance for Desi Jones. And then, of course, he commits to Ohio State. But Penn State still could. I am fully expecting 4 prospects in this class of 2025 and possibly even a 5th if everything does work itself out.
They just need to kind of see themselves through the course. And just like I mentioned earlier, they could use the portal to their advantage too. There's nothing that says they can't take a kid with 2 years of eligibility in the 16th or the 30th of the portal that's coming up. That's just when the kids enter. They could take them after. So this spring has a lot more options that might meet the eye for the public.
In our last segment, there could be a headliner prospect, definitely a priority target for Penn State. He's narrowed it down to his top 4, and the Nittany Lions are in that top 4. Can Penn State land him? What are the chances, and how big of a prospect would he be for Penn State? We'll discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel, the official sports book of Locked On. The sports calendar is loaded, and FanDuel is making it even more exciting to get in on the action because right now, new customers can get $200. That is right, $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $200 to use on the tournament. That is $200 to use on Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, and so much more. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And remember, if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams, talking more than just football. So an extension of that, recruiting itself, but men's basketball, wrestling, and all that here in Locked On Nittany Lions. I encourage you to go check out Brian's work on X. He also does a lot of writing, covering Auburn, covering recruiting, and also talking about the Seminoles of Florida State. Trent Wilson is a name that recruiting fans have certainly heard of, as he's out of the Maryland area. He's an upper 4-star prospect, and he's being recruited by Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Penn State, just to name 3 out of his 4. Wilson, I like a lot. This is a name that we brought up on the podcast quite a bit, Brian, in the past. Just kind of keeping an eye on his recruitment. It's going to be some stiff competition to see if they can get him. And he's had Penn State. Penn State's just always been up front. They've been one of the first schools to recruit him. And yes, he is a headline prospect. If you can get this, because we've talked about how defensive line, where's defensive line? They don't have any prospects yet committed in this class of 2025. Trent Wilson kind of changes all of that because it's the first domino to fall. And then other prospects, other defensive line players will want to follow him to Penn State if he does commit to the Nittany Lions.
Hard to find, 6'3", 270, and could move. That's bottom line. I tell people this all the time. It's about measurables, size and all that, and measurables in terms of how many there are at that spot. If you ask coaches, corner is the hardest thing to find because most kids don't want to play it, but at least there are more guys that size that could play. You can move guys around. D-line, man, it's a low numbers game there. Every now and then a tight end moves or a linebacker, but that's about it. So it's hard to find guys over 250, and this kid can move. He can get to the quarterback. He could be a 3 technique that you have to double team. That's why he's got offers from a lot of programs. He's played against pretty good competition in Maryland. He's going to be a little more battle tested, probably a little more ready as like a redshirt freshman to play at the high Big Ten level. It would be a big pickup for Penn State or any other school, to be honest.
Yes, he is from the same high school, actually, as Marcus Allen. If Penn State fans remember him, played safety, blocked the field goal against Ohio State the last time Penn State beat the Buckeyes. But that same high school there, it looks like Oklahoma's the favorite to land him, but he's made no indication whether which way of if he's going to go to the Sooners, the Nittany Lions, or the Buckeyes. He does have the Terps, Maryland Terps in there in his top 4, so that's his top 4. But I think it's important to also realize that he does have an upcoming visit, an official visit with Penn State for the blue and white spring game on April 13th. So he announces this top 4, and then one of his earliest visits is going to be an official to Happy Valley.
Yeah, this is important. If you get those visits, you get them lined out, and they've had him on campus before, obviously. If you're in that kind of mix, you can say you're closer to home than the other schools. I mean, Oklahoma's a long way from the state of Maryland.
Yes,
but they've got a great defensive line coach and a tremendous recruiter. But we've got a great defense. You could be close to home. You could be a part of the tradition, 112,000 or whatever it is. I think it's a pretty good sell for Penn State.
Let's see. Now, no official commitment date has been set, but just continue to watch. Is that Wilson is a priority. I would say that he is at the top of the class of 2025 big board for the Nittany Lions and someone that could commit over the summer if everything lines up for him, but that's ultimately his decision. But it's important to realize right now that he would change the trajectory of the defensive line recruiting if he does commit. He is that important. So Matt Zollers could be a headline prospect for Penn State in 2025. So could Trent Wilson on the defensive side of things if everything goes well. That's going to wrap it up for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. We'll be on commitment watch for Zollers. And as you know, the spring season comes to a close. Recruiting really amps up here. So it's always great to talk some recruiting with you, Brian. Thanks so much for the time again, as always, and looking forward to our next conversation very soon.
Thank you very much, my friend. Have a good day.
Thanks so much for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. Like the episode, share it with friends and family. And don't forget, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's available in the Free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on YouTube and the Free Fire TV channels app.